I stood there in the blinding Colorado sun, squinting at the empty spot where our car had been just 10 minutes ago. My wife, Chloe, and her friends, Isla, Stephanie, and Lauren, had vanished. At first, I thought it was one of their stupid pranks. They were always doing stuff like this, pushing boundaries, testing how much I'd take before I snapped. 5 years of marriage, and I'd gotten used to their little games, the way they'd laugh at me, the way Chloe would join in instead of standing up for me. But this felt different. My phone was still plugged into the car charger, my wallet tucked in the glove box. All I had was the faded t-shirt and jeans I was wearing, and a growing pit in my stomach as the minutes ticked by. We'd been on this road trip to Stephanie's lake house for 3 days now, and I'd been miserable the whole time. Chloe had begged me to come, said it'd be a chance to bond with her crew. I wasn't big on the idea. Her friends always treated me like an outsider, tossing out jabs and inside jokes I wasn't part of, but I went anyway, because I loved her. Or at least, I thought I did. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, just a dusty little stop off the highway with a flickering sign and a single pump. I'd gone inside to use the bathroom, figuring they'd wait. They always waited. Except this time, they didn't. An hour passed. I paced the cracked pavement, kicking pebbles, telling myself they'd come back any second, tires crunching gravel, Chloe's voice calling out, "Gotcha." But the road stayed quiet. 2 hours in, sweat was dripping down my neck, and my throat was dry. I kept replaying the last few days in my head. The way Stephanie smirked when she accidentally spilled coffee on my lap. How Lauren whispered something to Chloe that made her giggle while glancing at me. How Isla just watched it all with that smug little grin. I should have seen it coming. They'd been building up to something, and I'd been too dumb to notice. A truck pulled up, its engine rumbling loud enough to shake me out of my thoughts. The driver, a big guy with a gray beard and a stained ball cap, leaned out the window. "You okay, buddy?" Been standing there a while. His voice was rough but kind, and it hit me like a punch. I wasn't okay. They weren't coming back. Chloe wasn't coming back. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, my ride left me. You think you could help?" He nodded, like it wasn't the first time he'd seen someone stranded out here. "Hop in. Where you headed?" I didn't even know. Home. Back to Chloe. The life we'd built. But as I climbed into the cab, something shifted inside me. 5 years of her laughing at me, brushing me off, letting her friends treat me like garbage. It all came rushing up, hot and heavy. I stared out the window as the gas station shrank in the side mirror. The trucker didn't ask too many questions, just kept driving, humming some old country song. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. I could have borrowed his phone, called Chloe, demanded answers. But what would she say? "It was a joke, babe. Don't be so sensitive." I'd heard it all before. Every time I complained about her friends, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I didn't get their humor. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I never would. But standing there alone, abandoned like some stray dog, I realized something. They didn't get me either. And Chloe? She'd picked them over me, again and again. The trucker dropped me off at a crossroad, pointing me toward Grand Junction, the nearest town. "Good luck, man," he said, tipping his cap. I nodded, my throat tight, and started walking. My shoes scuffed the dirt, the sun beating down on my head. No phone, no money, no plan, just me and the open road. Part of me wanted to turn back, to beg someone at the gas station to call her, to fix this. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me forward. I was done being the punchline, done being the guy they laughed at. Chloe and her friends thought they'd won, thought they'd broken me. But as I trudged toward Grand Junction, a strange calm settled over me. They hadn't broken me. They'd set me free. I didn't know what was waiting for me in that town. I didn't know how I'd eat, where I'd sleep, or how I'd get by with nothing. But for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of what Chloe would think. I wasn't worried about her friend's next move. I was alone, yeah, but I wasn't helpless. The road stretched out ahead, endless and empty, and I kept walking. They'd left me behind, but maybe that was the best thing they could have done. Maybe this was my chance to figure out who I was without her, without them. By the time the sun started dipping low, turning the sky orange, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back. Not to Chloe, not to that life. Whatever came next, it was mine to build. I stood at that dusty crossroad where the trucker dropped me off, the Colorado wind kicking up little swirls of dirt around my feet. Grand Junction was somewhere ahead, but I didn't have a map, a phone, or a dime to my name. Just the clothes on my back and a head full of spinning thoughts. Chloe and her friends had left me high and dry, and part of me still wanted to find a way to call her, to hear her voice, to demand she turn the car around. But then I remembered how she'd laughed when Stephanie accidentally knocked my beer over at the lake house, how she'd shrugged when I asked her to stick up for me. 5 years of that. 5 years of feeling like a guest in my own marriage. No, I wasn't calling her. Not this time. I started walking toward town, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. The sun was still high, baking the ground, and sweat soaked through my shirt. I didn't know how far Grand Junction was. Miles, probably, but I didn't care. Every step felt like a choice, like I was leaving her behind one footprint at a time. My mind kept drifting back to the gas station, to the moment I stepped out of that grimy bathroom and saw nothing but empty pavement. They'd planned it, hadn't they? Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, all giggling in the car as they peeled out, thinking it'd be hilarious to ditch me. I could almost hear Chloe saying, "He'll figure it out, he always does." Well, I was figuring it out now, just not the way she expected. A pickup truck rumbled by, and I stuck out my thumb, hoping for a lift. The driver, a guy with a scruffy beard and a faded flannel shirt, slowed down and leaned out the window. "Need a ride?" he asked, eyeing me like he wasn't sure if I was trouble. "Yeah, heading to Grand Junction," I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded. "Hop in. I'm going that way." I climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the break. The cab smelled like oil and cigarettes, but it beat walking. "What's your story?" he asked as we rolled down the highway. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Got left behind by some people I thought I could trust." He grunted, like he'd heard that one before. "Happens more than you'd think out here." He dropped me off on the edge of Grand Junction, near a cluster of low buildings and a blinking traffic light. "Take care, man," he said, and drove off. I stood there, taking it in. A small town with a mix of old brick storefronts and newer chain stores. People going about their day like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong for me. No wallet, no ID, no way to prove who I was. I needed help, and fast. I spotted a sign for a homeless shelter a few blocks down, a plain building with a cross painted on the side. My stomach twisted at the thought. Me in a shelter? But what choice did I have? Inside, it was dim and smelled like bleach and stale coffee. A guy behind the counter looked up. Roy, his name tag said. He was older, maybe 50, with a shaved head and a no-nonsense stare. "You lost or just broke?" he asked, sizing me up. "Both," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "Got ditched out on the highway. No money, no phone, nothing." Roy didn't blink. "Happens. You got a name?" "Yeah. Mike," I said, figuring it was easier to stick to the truth for now. He handed me a clipboard with a form. "Fill this out. We'll get you a bed for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." That night, I lay on a cot in a room full of snoring strangers, staring at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't shut off. Chloe's face kept popping up, her voice, her laugh. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still ached for her to show up, to say it was all a mistake. But Roy's words stuck with me. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." He didn't mess around. The next morning, he sat me down with a cup of weak coffee and a plan. "You need ID to do anything. Job, bank, whatever. Takes time, but we'll start the process. Meantime, you need cash." I nodded, feeling useless. "Know anywhere hiring?" I asked. Roy smirked. "There's a diner down the street. Owner's a tough old broad named Jacqueline. Tell her I sent you." The diner was a squat little place called Jackie's, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Jacqueline was behind the counter, a wiry woman in her 60s with tattoos snaking up her arms and a voice like gravel. "Roy says you need work," she said, not even looking up from wiping the counter. "Yeah, I do," I replied, shifting on my feet. "Anything you got." She squinted at me, like she was trying to see through me. "Dishwasher quit yesterday. Pays crap. Hours are long. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." I blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. "Okay, I'm in." She tossed me an apron, and just like that, I was scrubbing plates in the back, hot water soaking my hands. It wasn't much, but it was something mine. No Chloe, no friends laughing at me, just me and a stack of greasy dishes. Roy checked in later that week, helped me file for a replacement ID. "You're doing all right, Mike," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I wasn't so sure, but I kept going. The shelter became my home, Jacqueline's diner my lifeline. I didn't call Chloe. Didn't even try. Every night, I fell asleep exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. I was starting over, from nothing, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make it work. I woke up on that cot in the shelter every morning with the same ache in my back, the same buzz of snores and coughs from the other guys around me. It had been a couple of weeks since Chloe and her friends ditched me at that gas station, and I was still getting used to this new life. Scrubbing dishes at Jacqueline's diner, sleeping on a borrowed bed, wearing clothes from a donation bin. My hands were raw from the hot water and soap, but I didn't mind. It kept me busy, kept my mind off her. Roy had been a rock, helping me navigate the mess of getting a replacement ID. Takes time, he'd said, handing me a stack of forms. But you'll get there. I nodded, grateful for his gruff kindness, and kept pushing forward. The diner was my world now. Jacqueline didn't mess around. She'd bark orders from the counter, her sharp eyes catching every mistake. Move faster, Mike, we ain't got all day, she'd yell, but there was no real venom in it. I worked double shifts whenever I could, piling up cash in a little envelope I stashed under my cot. My first paycheck wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a cheap prepaid phone from the gas station down the street. I held it in my hands, the plastic still shiny, and felt a rush of something like pride. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, bought with my own money, not Chloe's, not anyone else's. I didn't need her anymore. Then the call started. I'd only had the phone a day when it buzzed in my pocket while I was elbow deep in suds. I wiped my hands on my apron and pulled it out. Chloe's number flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped. I let it ring, watching it like it might bite me, until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. Her voice came through, soft and shaky, like she'd been practicing what to say. Mike, where are you? We waited for you. It was just a joke. We're so worried. Please call me back. I stood there, staring at the sink, the water still running. Worried? They'd left me in the middle of nowhere with nothing. If they'd waited, they'd have come back by now. The phone buzzed again, Stephanie this time. I hit play on her voicemail, and her tone was totally different, all smug and casual. Come on, dude. You have to admit, it was hilarious. Call us back, all right. Hilarious. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles went white. That's what I was to them. A punchline. A story to laugh about over drinks at the lake house. More calls came after that. A flood of them. Chloe again. Then Lauren. Then Stephanie, piling up with texts and voicemails. We miss you. Where'd you go? This isn't funny anymore. I scrolled through them all, my chest tight, my head spinning. Chloe's words kept echoing. Fake concern, fake tears. She didn't care. None of them did. I sat on my cot that night, the shelter quiet except for the creak of springs and the hum of the heater. The phone glowed in my hand, their messages lighting up the screen. I listened to Chloe's first one again, then Stephanie's, then one from Lauren that was just her giggling before it cut off. My thumb hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to dial Chloe, to scream at her, to ask why she'd done this. But what would it change? She'd just laugh it off, or cry and make me feel guilty, like she always did. I'd spent years swallowing their crap, smiling through it because I thought that's what a good husband did. Not anymore. I went through the list. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, and blocked every single one. My fingers shook a little as I did it, but once it was done, the phone went silent. No more buzzing, no more lies. I leaned back against the wall, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It felt like cutting a rope I'd been tangled in for years. They couldn't reach me now. They didn't get to decide how this ended. I did. The next day, I went back to the diner like nothing had happened, plunging my hands into the dishwater, letting the heat burn away the last of their voices in my head. Jacqueline noticed something was off, though. You're quiet today, she said, tossing me a rag to wipe down the counter. Trouble. I shrugged, not wanting to get into it. Just sorting some stuff out. She snorted. Long as it don't mess with my kitchen, sort of way. I smirked at that. She didn't care about my drama, just the job. It was refreshing. Roy checked in later, handing me a paper with a case number for my ID. Coming along, he said. You holding up? I nodded. Yeah, better than I thought. He clapped me on the shoulder and left me to it. By the end of the week, I'd saved enough to buy a second-hand jacket from the shelter's donation pile. Nothing fancy, but it kept the chill off. I walked back to my cot each night, The prepaid phone silent in my pocket and felt lighter. Chloe and her friends were gone, cut out like a bad habit. I didn't need their apologies or their excuses. I had work, a bed, a plan, small things, but they were mine. The ache was still there, sure, the sting of betrayal, but it was fading. Every dish I scrubbed, every dollar I tucked away, I was building something new, something they couldn't touch. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without dreaming of her. I'd been at the diner for months now, and things were starting to feel steady. Not perfect, but steady. The shelter was still my home, but I'd saved enough to move into a tiny studio above a laundromat in Grand Junction. It wasn't much, just a single room with a lumpy mattress, a hot plate, and a bathroom so small I could barely turn around in it. But it was mine. No more cots, no more snoring strangers, just a key in my pocket and a door I could lock. Jacqueline had seen me busting my tail at the diner and bumped me up to prep cook, which meant more hours and a little more cash. I'd chop onions and peel potatoes in the back, the rhythm of the knife keeping my hands busy and my mind quiet. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was earning something real. The nights were still tough, though. I'd lie on that creaky mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and Chloe would creep into my head. I'd see her smile, hear her laugh. Not the mean one she used with her friends, but the soft one she'd give me back when things were good, back before I became her punching bag. I'd wonder what she was doing, if she missed me, if she even cared. The loneliness hit hard sometimes, a cold weight in my chest that wouldn't go away. But then morning would come, and I'd drag myself out of bed, pull on my jacket, and head to the diner. No fear of her judgment, no cruel jabs from her friends. Just me, free to breathe, free to be. One night, after a long shift, I was messing around with my prepaid phone, bored and restless. I kept it simple, no contacts, no ties to the past, but curiosity got the better of me. I made a fake social media account, just a random name and no picture, and looked her up. Chloe's profile popped up, still public, still full of her perfect little life. There were pictures from the lake house trip, her and Stephanie posing by the water, Isla grinning with a drink in her hand. Then I saw it, a post about me. It was a photo of us from years ago, smiling at some picnic, and her caption hit me like a slap. Missing my love. I pray he finds his way back to me. I stared at it, my thumb frozen on the screen. Missing me? She hadn't even gone back for me. She'd driven off and left me to rot. I almost laughed, right there in that dingy apartment, the sound bouncing off the bare walls. It was so fake, so Chloe, turning herself into the victim, like I'd wandered off on my own instead of being abandoned. I scrolled through the comments, Stephanie saying, "He'll turn up, don't worry." Lauren chiming in with, "Sending you hugs." And my stomach turned. They were all in on it, playing this game like I was the bad guy. I clicked off the phone and tossed it onto the mattress, running my hands through my hair. She hadn't changed. None of them had. But I had. I wasn't the guy in that picnic photo anymore, the one who'd grin and take it while they tore me down. I was someone else now, someone they didn't know. The next day at the diner, I was quieter than usual, still chewing on what I'd seen. Jacqueline noticed, of course, she always did. "You look like someone kicked your dog," she said, sliding a plate of fries my way during a slow moment. I shrugged, picking at the food. "Just thinking too much." She raised an eyebrow, her tattooed arms crossed. "About what? That ex of yours?" I froze, surprised she'd guessed it. I'd never told her the whole story, just bits and pieces. "Yeah," I admitted. "Saw something online. She's acting like she's the one who got hurt." Jacqueline snorted, loud and sharp. "Sounds like a real piece of work. Good riddance, kid." I nodded, managing a small smile. She was right. Good riddance. Work kept me grounded. I'd dice vegetables, flip burgers when the cook needed a hand, wipe down counters, anything to keep moving. The diner had its regulars, folks who'd nod at me or leave a couple bucks on the table, and that felt good, like I was part of something. My hands were calloused now, my arms stronger from hauling crates and scrubbing pans. I'd catch my reflection in the diner's glass doors sometimes, tired eyes, messy hair, but a guy who was making it, one day at a time. Chloe's post faded from my mind, replaced by the clatter of plates and Jacqueline's gruff voice calling out orders. I stopped checking her social media after that. Didn't need to. Whatever she was saying, whatever story she was spinning, it didn't matter. I had my studio, my job, my life, Small, sure, but growing. The loneliness still came around, especially on quiet nights when the laundromat downstairs hummed and rattled, but it wasn't as sharp anymore. I'd wake up to the smell of detergent drifting through the floorboards, pull on my boots, and head out into the cold morning air. No one was waiting to mock me. No one was rolling their eyes at my every word. I could just be Mike, plain, simple Mike, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, not sinking in quicksand. Freedom wasn't loud or flashy. It was this, my key, my paycheck, my choice. And I wasn't giving it back. I'd been living above the laundromat for a while now, settling into a routine that felt like mine. Work at the diner, save my cash, sleep in my own space. The days blended together, but they were good days, steady ones. Then she walked in, Sienna. She started coming to Jacqueline's diner twice a week, always in the same booth by the window, always with a stack of textbooks and a pen in her hand. She was a med student, I figured, from the way she'd mutter medical terms under her breath while scribbling notes. Her order never changed: Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, and she'd barely look up when I brought it over. I'd watch her sometimes, amused at how she'd get so lost in her studying that her fork would hover halfway to her mouth for a full minute before she noticed. I don't know why I started messing with her. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I just wanted to see if she'd crack a smile. I'd swap out my name tag with random names I'd make up, Bob one day, Steve the next, Carl after that, just to see if she'd catch it. She didn't at first, too buried in her books, but one morning, I walked over with Rusty pinned to my shirt, and she finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the tag, then back to my face. "Your name tag is wrong," she said, her voice quiet but firm, like she was diagnosing me. I grinned, caught off guard. "Is it?" I shot back, even though it was. My real name was Mike, and she'd never asked. She smirked, just a little, and went back to her notes. That was it, our first real moment, and it stuck with me. Work kept me busy, but Sienna became the highlight of my week. She'd show up, order her usual, and I'd find excuses to swing by her table, refill her coffee, clear her plate, ask if she needed anything. She'd nod or mumble a thanks, but that smirk stayed in my head, like a challenge. One day, she came in looking frazzled, her hair messy, her books heavier than usual. "Rough night?" I asked, setting her coffee down. She sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Exams. I haven't slept in 2 days." I nodded, not pushing it, but I slipped an extra hash brown onto her plate when she wasn't looking. She noticed, glanced up at me, and said, "You're sneaky." I just shrugged. "Gotta keep you awake somehow." Our first date wasn't even planned. She came in one evening, all dressed up, jeans and a nice top, not her usual sweatshirt, and told me her friends had bailed on a reservation at some fancy pizza place across town. "I'm not wasting it," she said, half to herself, then looked at me. "You free?" I was wiping down the counter, my shift almost over, and Jacqueline was in earshot. "Go on, kid," she barked, waving me off. "You're no use to me moping around." So I went. We split a pepperoni pizza and a pitcher of soda, and she laughed, really laughed, when I told her about the name tag thing. "I knew it wasn't Rusty," she said, her eyes bright. "You're not that old." We talked all night, about her med school stress, my diner gig, dumb stuff like favorite movies. It was easy, natural, like we'd known each other forever. 6 months later, she moved into my little studio. It was cramped. Her books took up half the space, and we'd trip over each other making dinner on that tiny hot plate, but I didn't care. She'd study late, her lamp glowing while I slept, and I'd wake up to her muttering anatomy terms in her sleep. It was weirdly comforting. A year after that, we got a bigger place together, a real apartment with a kitchen and a couch that didn't smell like bleach. Sienna was different from Chloe. She didn't mock me, didn't make me feel small. When I'd doubt myself, she'd just say, "You've got this." And somehow, I'd believe her. We'd cook together, watch old TV shows, argue over who left the dishes in the sink. It was simple, but it was ours. Meanwhile, Chloe wouldn't let go. She'd started emailing me, found my address somehow, probably from an old bill or something. The first one came a few weeks after Sienna moved in, popping up on my phone while I was chopping peppers at the diner. "Mike, I just want to know you're okay," it read. "I miss you." "We all do." I stared at it, my knife hovering over the cutting board. "Miss me?" She'd left me at a gas station with nothing, laughed about it with her friends, and now she missed me? I deleted it without replying. More came after that, some short, some long, all dripping with that fake sweetness she'd mastered. I messed up, I know. Please talk to me. I saw your grandma. She's worried. I'd read them, feel that old ache in my chest, then hit delete. Sienna caught me once, frowning at my phone. Who's that? She asked. Nobody, I said, and she didn't push. She didn't need to. I wasn't going back. Life with Sienna was good, better than I'd thought I deserved. The diner was humming, my hands were steady, and Chloe's emails were just noise I could tune out. I'd built something new, something solid, and every day with Sienna proved it. She'd tease me about my cooking, I'd laugh at her terrible singing, and we'd fall asleep tangled up on that secondhand couch. Chloe could write all she wanted. I didn't know her a damn thing. My world was here now, with Sienna, and I wasn't letting go. I stood in the kitchen of Jacqueline's diner, flipping a burger on the grill, the sizzle filling the air as grease popped against my apron. Things had been good. Better than good, really. Sienna and I were settled in our new apartment, a step up from the cramped studio above the laundromat. It had a real bedroom, a stove that didn't smoke, and a window that let in actual sunlight. Life felt solid, like I'd finally climbed out of the hole Chloe and her friends had left me in. Work was steady too. I'd been at the diner long enough that Jacqueline trusted me with more than just dishes and prep. She'd started leaning on me, barking less and nodding more when I got things done right. That day, though, she called me over to the counter during a slow stretch, her sharp eyes locked on me like she had something big to say. Mike, she said, wiping her hands on a rag, you're not half bad at this. I smirked, thinking she was joking, but her face stayed serious. I'm opening a second spot across town, smaller joint, but mine. Need someone to run it. You in? I froze, spatula in hand, the burger sizzling behind me. Me? Run a diner? I'd gone from scrubbing plates to cooking, sure, but managing a whole place? You serious? I asked, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She snorted. Do I look like I'm kidding? You've got the chops. Work hard, don't steal, don't whine. Say yes or no. My head spun. A year ago, I'd been dumped at a gas station with nothing. Now I was getting offered this. I almost said no, convinced it was some trick, like Chloe's pranks all over again. That night, I sat on our couch, Sienna's and mine, staring at the TV without really watching it. She came home from a late study session, dropping her bag by the door, and saw me just sitting there. What's up? She asked, kicking off her shoes. I told her about Jacqueline's offer, my voice low, like saying it out loud might jinx it. She wants me to run her new diner. Me in charge. Sienna plopped down next to me, her knee brushing mine. And you're thinking about turning it down? She said, reading me like always. I shrugged, rubbing my neck. I don't know. What if I screw it up? She grabbed my hand, her grip firm. You're already running that place half the time, helping with orders, fixing stuff when she's yelling at someone else. Just make it official. You've got this. Her words hit me hard, like a shove I didn't know I needed. She didn't doubt me, not for a second, and that felt new, strange, good. Chloe would have laughed, said something like, you? A boss? And her friends would have piled on. But Sienna just looked at me, steady and sure, and I nodded. Okay, I'll do it. She smiled, that small one I loved, and leaned her head on my shoulder. Good. Now stop moping. We've got dishes to do. I laughed, the weight lifting a little, and we washed plates together, her humming some off-key song while I splashed water at her. The next day, I told Jacqueline yes. She grunted, like she'd expected it, and handed me a set of keys. Don't burn it down, she said, then went back to counting cash. The new diner was a hole-in-the-wall spot. 10 tables, a counter, a kitchen barely big enough for two, but it was mine to run. I started the next week, setting up schedules, ordering supplies, cooking when the line got slammed. It was chaos at first, waitresses forgetting orders, me burning a batch of fries, but I figured it out. Sienna was right. I'd been doing this stuff already, just without the title. The place started humming, regulars trickling in, and Jacqueline even stopped by once, nodding like she approved. Not bad, kid, she said, and I felt taller than I had in years. Then Chloe's email came. I was at the new diner, checking inventory on my phone, when it popped up. Mike, your grandmother's been asking about you. Please let us know you're alive. My gut twisted. Grandma. She'd always been sweet, sending me cards even after I married Chloe. But Chloe bringing her up now? It was a cheap shot, a hook to reel me back in. I pictured her typing it, fake tears in her eyes, trying to guilt me like always. I deleted it, my thumb slamming the screen harder than it needed to. She didn't get to use grandma against me, not after what she'd done. I hadn't called home in a while, sure, but I'd fixed that myself, not through her. I threw myself into the diner after that, keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander. The place was picking up, truckers stopping by, locals chatting me up like I was one of them. I'd come home to Sienna studying at our table, her books spread out, and she'd ask how it went. Good, I'd say and mean it. We'd cook dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta or burgers, and talk about her classes, my day, the future. Chloe's emails kept coming, piling up in my trash folder, but I didn't open them. She was a ghost, a shadow I could ignore. My life was here. The diner, Sienna, the keys in my pocket. I'd been abandoned once, left to figure it out, and I had. Now I was building something better, something they couldn't touch. Every night, I locked up the diner, drove home to Sienna, and felt like a man who'd finally found his footing. I was flipping eggs in the kitchen of my third diner, the one on the edge of town, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The morning rush was in full swing, truckers hollering for coffee, waitresses darting between tables, and I almost ignored it. 15 years had turned me into a different man. Sienna and I were married, 2 kids tearing up our house, 3 diner locations keeping me busy. Life was good, loud, full. Nothing like the empty shell I'd been when Chloe left me at that gas station. I wiped my hands on my apron, pulled out my phone, and saw it. A LinkedIn notification. Someone viewed your profile 27 times today. My stomach did a little flip. I didn't use LinkedIn much, just a basic page with my name, the diners, a blurry photo Sienna made me take. But 27 times? That wasn't normal. I tapped it open, the grill hissing behind me, and there she was, Chloe. Her name hit me like a cold splash of water, right there on the screen, tied to some company I didn't care about. 27 views in one day. She'd been digging through my life, over and over. I set the phone down, my hands gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. 15 years, and she was back, creeping in like a shadow I thought I'd shaken off. I flipped the eggs, barely watching, my mind racing. What did she want? Why now? I'd blocked her emails years ago, ignored her guilt trips, built a whole world without her. But here she was, poking around, silent but loud in my head. The diner smelled like bacon and syrup, the clatter of plates keeping me grounded. I plated the eggs, handed them off to a waitress, and tried to focus. Coffee needed refilling, hash browns were burning, but Chloe's name stuck with me. I pictured her sitting somewhere, clicking my profile, seeing the diners, maybe even the old job at Jacqueline's I'd listed. Did she know about Sienna? The kids? I hadn't posted much, just enough to look legit, but 27 views meant she was looking hard. I wiped my forehead, sweat mixing with the heat, and grabbed my phone again. Her profile stared back. Chloe, older now, hair cut short, a tight smile in her picture. Consultant, it said. I didn't read more. Didn't want to. I stepped into the back, a tiny storeroom with shelves of flour and canned goods, and leaned against the wall. My heart was thumping too fast, like I'd run a mile. 15 years, 2 kids, a wife, a business, and she could still rattle me. I hated that. I'd worked so hard to bury her, to forget the gas station, the laughter, the way she'd made me feel like nothing. Now she was back, not even saying anything, just watching. Was she jealous? Mad? Desperate? I ran my hands through my hair, pacing the cramped space. Part of me wanted to message her, "What's your deal?" But I stopped myself. That's what she'd want. Me reaching out, giving her a crack to slip through. I went back to the grill, threw myself into the rush, cooking, pouring, wiping down tables when the waitresses got swamped. The regulars nodded at me. Some guy asked for extra ketchup, and I kept moving, kept my hands busy. But she was there, in the back of my mind, those 27 views like an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't tell Sienna when I got home that night. She was on the couch, folding laundry, the kids upstairs yelling about some game. Busy day? She asked, glancing up. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile, kissing her forehead. Same old. She didn't push, just handed me a pile of socks to sort, and I sat there, folding, pretending everything was fine. The house was warm, Smelled like dinner. Chicken and rice, Sienna's go-to, and the kids tumbled down, begging for dessert. I laughed, said no, felt normal for a minute. But Chloe lingered, a ghost I couldn't shake. I didn't check LinkedIn again, didn't need to see if she'd looked more. 27 was enough. I helped Sienna with the dishes, her hip bumping mine, and tried to let it go. My life was here, 2 kids fighting over the last cookie, a wife who didn't laugh at me, diners I'd built from nothing. Chloe couldn't touch that, not really. Still, I went to bed with her name in my head, staring at the ceiling while Sienna slept beside me. The next day, I was at the first diner, pouring coffee, when my phone buzzed again. I didn't look, just shoved it deeper in my pocket. If it was her, I didn't want to know. I'd spent years locking her out, and now she was knocking, quiet but steady. I focused on the work, grill, counter, cash register, kept my hands moving, my voice steady. She was out there, somewhere, but I was here, standing tall. Whatever she wanted, whatever game she was playing, I wasn't biting. Not yet. Not ever, if I could help it. I was wiping down the counter at the original diner, the one Jacqueline first hired me for, when the door jingled and they walked in, Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla. It was 3 days after those LinkedIn alerts, and I'd been on edge, half expecting something like this. The breakfast rush had just died down, leaving a handful of regulars sipping coffee, the air thick with grease and burnt toast. I saw them before they saw me, Chloe's short hair catching the light, Stephanie's swagger still there, Isla hunched like she wanted to disappear. My gut twisted, hands freezing on the rag. 15 years since they ditched me at that gas station, and now they were here, in my diner, my turf. I didn't move, just watched them pick a booth by the window and sit, their voices low but familiar. I could have stayed back, let the waitress handle it, but something pulled me out there. Maybe anger, maybe just needing to see it through. I grabbed a pot of coffee, more for something to hold than anything else, and walked over. Chloe spotted me first, her eyes going wide, her mouth dropping open. "Oh my God, it's you," she said, her voice shaky, like she hadn't rehearsed it. Stephanie leaned back, smirking like always. "Hey, look at you, big shot." Isla glanced up, then down fast, her hands fidgeting with the menu. I stood there, coffee pot in hand, looking at them. Older, worn, desperate in a way I didn't expect. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping it short, my voice harder than I felt. Chloe shifted, leaning forward, her fingers twisting together. "Mike, can we talk? Please." I didn't sit, didn't soften. "I'm working. Talk." She swallowed, glancing at Stephanie for backup, then started. We need your help." It spilled out. Her life had crashed. Her artsy little business went under. Her marriage, some guy I didn't know, fell apart, and she was broke, begging now. Stephanie jumped in, casual like it was no big deal. "You're doing all right? 3 diners? We just need a hand. For old times." Isla nodded, barely audible. "Just a little help." I listened, letting it sink in. Chloe's sob story, Stephanie's charm, Isla's guilt. They'd planned this, tracked me down, thought I'd roll over. I stood there, coffee pot still hot in my grip, watching them squirm. Chloe's eyes got wet, Stephanie's smirk twitched, Isla shredded the edge of her menu. I remembered her LinkedIn stalking, 27 views, then showing up here, thinking I'd cave because I used to. "Wait here," I said, turning away. I walked to the office, a cramped box with a desk and a stack of receipts, my boots heavy on the floor. They wanted money. After leaving me with nothing, laughing about it, they thought I'd just hand it over. I sat down, the chair creaking, and stared at the wall. My hands shook a little, not from fear, from anger. I could have yelled, thrown them out, but I didn't. I grabbed an envelope, wrote a check, and headed back. They were still there, whispering, heads snapping up when I walked over. I dropped the envelope in front of Chloe, watching her fingers snatch it up, her face lighting up for a second. She opened it. $73.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction back home, 15 years ago. Her smile crashed, her breath catching. Stephanie grabbed it, glaring. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. I leaned in, my voice low, steady. "That's what it would have cost me to get back to you that day. I didn't. You don't get more than that." Chloe's mouth opened, no sound coming out. Stephanie shoved the check at me. "You're a jerk, Mike. After everything." I cut her off. "After everything? You left me. You laughed. This is me being generous." Isla flinched, her hands balling up, but she didn't speak. I straightened, looking at them. Chloe pale, Stephanie fuming, Isla shrinking. "It's time to leave," I said, loud enough for the diner to hear. "Don't come back." I turned, walked to the counter, my heart pounding but my steps sure. The waitress hovered, unsure, but I waved her off. "They're done," I said, grabbing a rag to wipe my hands. They sat there a minute, stunned, then scrambled up, Chloe shoving the envelope in her purse, Stephanie muttering, Isla trailing behind. The door jingled shut, and the diner went back to normal, coffee pouring, forks clinking, like they'd never been there. I stood behind the counter, pouring myself a cup, my hands steady now. They'd come begging, thinking I'd bend, and I'd shut them down. It wasn't loud or messy, just cold, final. I sipped the coffee, bitter on my tongue, and watched the regulars chat, oblivious. Chloe's tears, Stephanie's anger, they didn't matter. I'd given them what they'd given me, just enough to walk away. The diner hummed around me, my diner, my life, and they were gone. I finished my shift, locked up, and drove home, the weight lifting with every mile. They'd tried, and they'd lost. That was it. I leaned against the diner's front window, the glass cold against my arm, watching Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla out in the parking lot. They'd just stormed out after I handed them that $73.50 check. Bus fare from Grand Junction, nothing more. And now they were at it, arguing like kids caught stealing. Stephanie was loud, her hands slashing the air, her face twisted up like she wanted to hit something. Chloe stood there, the envelope crumpled in her fist, staring at the ground, her shoulders hunched. Isla hung back, her arms crossed tight, looking like she might bolt or cry. Maybe both. I couldn't hear them through the window, but I didn't need to. They'd come in begging, thinking I'd cave, and I'd sent them packing. Now they were unraveling, and I just watched, feeling nothing. The sun was low, painting the lot orange, their shadows stretching long across the gravel. Stephanie jabbed a finger at Chloe, her mouth moving fast, probably blaming her for dragging them here, for screwing it up. Chloe shook her head, slow and tired, then shoved the check into her purse like it was trash. Isla shifted, glancing at the diner, her eyes catching mine for a second before darting away. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, my coffee mug cooling on the counter behind me. They could fight all day out there. It didn't touch me. I'd given them what they deserved, closed the book on 15 years of their garbage, and that was that. I turned away, grabbing the mug and taking a sip. Cold now, bitter, but I didn't care. The diner was quiet, just a couple of regulars lingering over pie, the jukebox humming some old tune. I wiped down the counter, slow and steady, letting the rag soak up the day. The waitresses buzzed around, clearing tables, shooting me quick looks but keeping their mouths shut. They knew something had happened. Those three walking in, me walking out with that envelope, but I didn't explain. "You good, Mike?" one asked, stacking plates. "Yeah," I said, short and sharp, and went back to wiping. I didn't want their questions, didn't want to drag it out. Chloe and her crew were gone, and I was done. Driving home, the truck's engine growled under me, the road dark except for my headlights cutting through. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind stuck on that scene. Chloe's face when she saw the check, Stephanie's snarl, Isla's silence. It should have felt good, shutting them down, and it did, mostly. But there was this itch, a little nag I couldn't shake. They'd looked desperate, broken, Chloe especially, with her sob story about her life falling apart. 15 years ago, I'd have cared, run after them, tried to fix it. Now, I just watched them leave. The house came into view, lights on, Sienna's car in the drive, and I let out a breath. This was real, my family, my life, not them. I walked in, kicking my boots off by the door, the smell of leftover lasagna hitting me. Sienna was at the kitchen table, papers spread out, a pen in her hand, grading again, probably. The kids were upstairs, their voices muffled, likely in bed but not asleep. She looked up, her glasses low on her nose. "Hey," she said, soft, then tilted her head. "You okay?" I nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her, my hands flat on the table. "They came by," I said, keeping it simple. Her eyebrows lifted, but she waited. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla asked for money. I gave them bus fare and told them to go. She set her pen down, leaning back, her eyes steady on mine. "Bus fare?" she asked, a little smile tugging her lips. I told her, $73.50, the exact cost to get back from Grand Junction all those years ago. How Chloe's face fell, how Stephanie snapped, how I walked away. Sienna listened, her hand resting on the table, calm like always. When I finished, she reached over, her fingers brushing mine. They can't take anything from you that you don't give them, she said, her voice firm, quiet. I looked at her, those words sinking in, and nodded. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. She squeezed my hand, then went back to her papers, leaving me sitting there, the weight lifting a little. She didn't need to say more. She got it, got me, and that was enough. We ate leftovers later, just the two of us, the kids finally quiet upstairs. I poked at the lasagna, my head still half in the parking lot, Stephanie yelling, Chloe staring, Isla shrinking. It didn't matter what they said out there, who they blamed. They'd come for a handout, and I'd given them a mirror instead. Sienna didn't ask more, just talked about the kids, our son's math test, our daughter's new obsession with drawing cats. I smiled, nodded, let her pull me back to now. After, we cleaned up, her hip bumping mine at the sink, and I felt steady again. That night, lying in bed, Sienna's breathing slow beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The house creaked, the kids shifting in their rooms, and I replayed it. Those three in my diner, then out in the lot, falling apart. They couldn't touch this, my family, my diners, me. I'd shut the door, locked it tight, and they were on the other side, where they belonged. The itch was still there, faint, but fading. Sienna was right. They got nothing I didn't give, and I'd given them the end. I closed my eyes, the days slipping away, and slept hard, done with their ghosts for good. I stood in the kitchen of our house, stirring a pot of chili on the stove, the smell of spices filling the air. It had been weeks since Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla walked into my diner, since I handed them that $73.50 check and watched them argue in the parking lot. I hadn't seen them since, not a call, not an email, not even a whisper on LinkedIn. They were gone, really gone this time, and I felt it, a quiet that settled deep, like a storm finally passing. Life rolled on. Sienna grading papers at the table, the kids chasing each other around the backyard, the diners humming with regulars. It was mine, all of it, and they couldn't touch it. I'd stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next knock. The chili bubbled, steam rising, and I tasted it. Needed more salt, maybe a kick of pepper. Sienna glanced up from her stack of tests, her glasses slipping down her nose. Smells good, she said, smiling that small smile I loved. Better be. I shot back, grinning, and she laughed, soft and easy. The kids burst in from outside, our son waving a muddy stick, our daughter yelling about a bug she'd found. Out, both of you, wash up. I barked, pointing to the sink, and they groaned but obeyed, splashing water everywhere. It was chaos, loud and messy, but it was ours. Chloe's face, those tears she'd tried to sell me, faded a little more every day, replaced by this. Work was good too. I bounced between the three diners, flipping burgers, checking stock, joking with the waitresses. The regulars knew me now. Old Tom with his coffee, the trucker who tipped big, the lady who always asked for extra napkins. They'd nod, say, "Hey, Mike," and I'd nod back, feeling like I belonged. Jacqueline stopped by the first diner one morning. Her tattoos faded, but her glare still sharp. "You didn't screw it up," she said, looking around, then clapped my shoulder and left. High praise from her. I laughed to myself, pouring coffee for a table, and thought about how far I'd come, from a gas station nobody to this. I didn't check on Chloe anymore. No fake social media accounts, no late-night scrolls. I'd done that once, years back, seen her play the grieving widow, but now? I didn't need to know. She was out there, somewhere, living whatever life she'd made after her business tanked, her marriage crumbled. Stephanie and Isla too, maybe still mad, maybe still blaming her. It didn't matter. They'd come begging, and I'd shut the door. That $73.50 check was the last thing I'd ever give them. Just enough to walk away, like they'd left me to do. I didn't feel bad, didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Sienna and I took the kids to the park that weekend, a crisp fall day with leaves crunching under our boots. Our son ran ahead, kicking a ball, while our daughter clung to my hand, pointing at every squirrel. Sienna walked beside me, her arm brushing mine, and we didn't say much, just watched, breathed, lived. I thought about Chloe for a second, her showing up, her voice cracking, and let it go. She couldn't take this from me, couldn't even come close. I'd built it all without her, despite her, and it was better than anything she'd ever offered. You're quiet, Sienna said, nudging me. Just happy, I replied, and she squeezed my hand, knowing I meant it. Back home, we ate the chili, too spicy, the kids complained, but they shoveled it down anyway. I sat at the table, watching them bicker over the last roll, Sienna rolling her eyes at their noise. This was it, the best revenge, if you could call it that. Not some big fight, not rubbing it in their faces, just living well, living real. Chloe wanted me to break, to crawl back, and I hadn't. I'd walked away from that gas station, from her, and kept going. Roy at the shelter, Jacqueline's diner, Sienna's laugh, these kids. Every step was mine, every piece earned. They'd lost, not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd stopped playing their game. The days kept rolling, school runs, diner shifts, quiet nights with Sienna on the couch. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Chloe was a memory, a shadow that couldn't reach me anymore. I'd see her sometimes, in a flash, her smirk, her tears, but it didn't stick. I'd turn the radio up, flip a burger, hug my daughter, and she'd fade. The diners thrived, the kids grew, Sienna and I argued over dumb stuff like whose turn it was to mow the lawn. It was simple, messy, perfect. I'd wake up early, make coffee, stand in our kitchen looking out at the yard, and feel it. Peace, deep and steady. One night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the porch, a beer in my hand, the air cool against my skin. Sienna came out, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside me. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice soft. I took a sip, staring at the stars. "Nothing," I said, then smiled. "Everything." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there, quiet, together. Chloe was gone, really gone, and I was here whole. The best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was this, right now, a life so good I didn't need to prove anything. I'd made it, and that was enough. I never imagined I'd be standing here, in front of this extravagant high-rise, its glass windows gleaming under the golden city lights. The entrance was adorned with towering floral arrangements, and the guests stepping out of luxury vehicles were dressed in their finest. Women in shimmering gowns, men in tailored tuxedos, all laughing, mingling, living in a world of status and power. And here I was, invited to a wedding I had no business attending. Claudia's wedding. My ex-wife. For years, I had pushed her out of my mind, letting time and distance erase the bitter ending we had shared. I had moved on, or at least that's what I had convinced myself. But then, the invitation arrived, handwritten, elegant, deliberate. The moment I saw the familiar curve of her script, I felt something stir deep inside me. "I hope you'll attend." That was all she had written. No explanation, no unnecessary pleasantries. Just those 4 words, weighted with meaning. I should have ignored it. But curiosity has a way of dragging a man into places he knows he shouldn't go. So, I came. Stepping inside the grand ballroom was like walking into another lifetime. The chandeliers hung like cascading crystals, illuminating the marble floors beneath my feet. Waiters glided through the room carrying glasses of champagne, and a live orchestra played a soft melody that melted into the air like silk. It was a world Claudia had always wanted, a world she had built for herself, far removed from the life we once shared. I kept to the shadows, unnoticed, at least until I saw him. Richard, the man who had taken my place. I knew of him. How could I not? A finance mogul, one of the elite, a man whose face graced business magazines alongside my ex-wife's. He stood at the center of the crowd, basking in admiration, his arm possessively wrapped around Claudia's waist. And then his eyes locked onto me. For a moment, I thought he might ignore me, pretend I didn't exist, as if I were nothing more than a ghost from Claudia's past. But instead, he smirked, that condescending kind of smile men like him reserved for people they believed were beneath them. He leaned in close, his voice a quiet sneer. "You're a middle school dropout, right?" I stilled. "Why don't you do yourself a favor and cut ties with my wife?" The audacity. I slowly turned my gaze to meet his, studying the arrogance in his expression. The way his lips curled with satisfaction, as if he expected me to shrink under his words. He had no idea who he was speaking to. I could have reacted, could have let my pride force me into a confrontation. But instead, I merely smiled, a knowing, amused kind of smile. Because if Richard thought I was a mere dropout, a forgotten footnote in Claudia's story, then he was in for a surprise he'd never see coming. There was a time when Claudia and I were inseparable. We weren't always these people. Her, the untouchable CEO of a major bank, and me, the man she had long left behind. There was a time when she looked at me the way a person looks at their world, with love, admiration, and a belief that together we could conquer anything. We met as teenagers, two people from vastly different backgrounds. Claudia had always been driven, her mind wired for ambition, for control, for calculated steps that would take her where she wanted to go. I, on the other hand, never cared for rules, for institutions, for paths that had been carved out by others. My heart belonged to music, to the piano, to the melodies that spoke louder than words ever could. Back then, she loved that about me. She would sit beside me on the piano bench, watching as my fingers danced across the keys, her head resting on my shoulder as I composed songs just for her. She told me my music made her feel alive, that it was the one thing in her structured world that felt unpredictable, real. You don't have to follow their rules, I had told her once. You can just live. She had smiled, a rare, soft smile that she only ever showed when it was just the two of us. I want the best for us. At the time, I believed her. But as the years passed, her love for my music turned into something else, something resentful, something disapproving. You can't just live on music alone, she would say, frustration creeping into her voice. What kind of life is that? To her, stability was everything. A future needed to be built, not left to chance. And in her mind, my refusal to conform, to chase promotions and degrees, meant that I had no future at all. At first, the changes were subtle, little comments here and there, gentle nudges to think about my future, to consider something more stable. But soon, it became a divide too wide to ignore. I remember the night it all came to a head. We were in our small apartment, the one we had moved into after college, the one where I had spent nights composing while she buried herself in business textbooks. She had come home late, her expression unreadable, her posture tense. "We need to talk," she had said. I already knew what was coming. "This isn't working." I had simply nodded. There was no yelling, no pleading, no desperate attempts to make her stay. I could see it in her eyes. She had already decided. She left, and I let her go. And so Claudia climbed the corporate ladder, and I disappeared into my music, traveling from city to city, performing in jazz bars, on street corners, in grand halls. She built her empire, and I built mine. But the difference was, mine didn't need validation. Years passed. She became powerful, influential, a name that commanded respect. And I became something she never saw coming. And now, here we were. Her wedding. Her perfect world. And yet, for some reason, she had invited me. I looked around the ballroom, at the crystal chandeliers, at the towering floral centerpieces, at the people dressed in wealth and status. This was her world now. Why did you even come? I turned at the sound of the voice and found Marcus, Claudia's younger brother, standing beside me. Unlike his sister, Marcus had never judged me. If anything, he had admired my music, often sneaking into my performances just to listen. "Curiosity, I suppose," I replied with a smirk. Marcus exhaled, shaking his head. "Richard's an idiot. He doesn't know who you are, does he?" "No," I said simply. Marcus gave a half laugh. "You could ruin him in a second, and he doesn't even know it." I shrugged. "That's the fun part." Just then, Richard's voice rang out again, louder this time, directed at me. "Why is someone like you even here? This event is for people of status." I turned my head slowly, meeting his gaze. He was enjoying this moment of superiority, this belief that he had won something, that I was nothing. I could have responded, could have humbled him with a few well-placed words. But instead, I simply chuckled. because this man had no idea who he had just insulted, and soon he would learn. The reception hall was grand, designed for people who lived their lives in the upper echelons of society. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, refracting golden light across tables set with silk napkins and polished silverware. A string quartet played in the background, the kind of elegant, restrained music that fit perfectly with Claudia's world. I took a sip of my drink, not particularly interested in the fine whiskey they were serving. Around me, conversations buzzed about stock markets, high-profile mergers, and political influence. This wasn't my world, and I had no desire to belong to it. Yet, despite that, I was here. I should have left the moment Richard threw his little insult my way. I had nothing to prove, nothing to gain from staying, but something about this moment, about standing in a room full of people who thought they knew everything, kept me rooted in place. And then, I saw him. Marcus. Unlike Claudia, Marcus had never let social status dictate his relationships. He had always been more open-minded, more genuine. He was a man who, despite his success as an investment analyst, still valued the simple things. We had met years ago, back when Claudia and I were still together. He was younger, still finding his way, and for some reason, he had gravitated toward me, intrigued by the way I lived. Where Claudia had seen irresponsibility, Marcus had seen freedom. He would sneak into my performances, absorbing the music as if it spoke to him in ways numbers and financial reports never could. And now, here he was, standing in front of me, shaking his head with a wry smile. "I told Claudia she shouldn't have invited you if Richard was going to act like that," he said, his voice low so only I could hear. "Let them have their moment," I replied, unaffected. "This is their night, after all." Marcus snorted. "That's generous of you. He doesn't deserve it, though. You know that, right?" I knew, but it wasn't my problem. Richard, however, was still enjoying his little power trip. "Why is someone like you even here?" he called out again, his voice deliberately loud enough for people nearby to hear. "This event is for people of status." I turned my head slightly, meeting his gaze. Around him, guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the hostility in his words. But Richard didn't care. He was too drunk on his own arrogance to notice. I chuckled, a quiet, amused sound that made his brow furrow. "What's funny?" he demanded, taking a step closer. "Nothing," I replied smoothly. "I just find it interesting how people assume status is defined by the clothes you wear, the title on your business card, or the weight of your bank account." Richard scoffed. "That's because it is. And you? You're just some nobody my wife made the mistake of inviting." His words were designed to sting, to put me in my place. But I didn't react the way he wanted. Instead, I just smiled. Because in that moment, I realized something. Richard had no idea who I was. And neither did Claudia. I had spent years building a life outside of their world, away from corporate skyscrapers and high society gatherings. I had poured my soul into my music, traveled the world, performed in places they would never step foot in. I had built something for myself, something real, something lasting. And yet, in their eyes, I was still the same man Claudia had walked away from all those years ago. That was the real joke. Marcus, standing beside me, smirked as if he could read my thoughts. "You really don't know who he is, do you?" he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Richard to hear. Richard frowned, his bravado faltering for the first time. "What the hell are you talking about?" I could have told him. I could have let him in on the truth right then and there. But where was the fun in that? Instead, I just took another sip of my drink and turned away, letting Richard stew in his own ignorance. Because soon enough, he was going to find out exactly who I was. And when that moment came, it would be his world that shattered. I wasn't always the man standing in this lavish ballroom, exchanging smug glances with men like Richard. There was a time when my name meant nothing, when my pockets were empty, and when Claudia looked at me as if I were a burden rather than a partner. I had grown up in a world where money was plentiful, where my father's name carried weight in boardrooms and business circles. But that world collapsed overnight. One bad investment, one wrong decision, and everything was gone. The grand estate we once lived in, sold to pay off debts. The expensive cars? repossessed before we could even adjust to the reality of being broke. My father was never the same after that. I remember the morning I woke up to find him sitting in the kitchen, staring at nothing, a cup of untouched coffee in his trembling hands. He had built an empire and lost it all, and in his eyes, I saw a man who had no idea how to live outside of wealth. But I was different. I wasn't tied to the stock market, to the endless pursuit of status, to the belief that life's value was measured in dollars. What I had, what no financial collapse could ever take away, was my music. Even after we moved into a tiny apartment, stripped of every luxury, I didn't care. I had my old keyboard, a set of worn-out headphones, and an imagination that never stopped creating melodies. That was when I met Marcus. I had been playing in the school music room, my fingers gliding over the keys, lost in a song I hadn't even realized I was composing. The door creaked open, and I glanced up to see a younger boy standing in the doorway, eyes wide with awe. "That was incredible," he had said. We became friends almost instantly. Marcus had always admired my music. He would sneak into rehearsals, watching me play, asking endless questions about how I composed, how I turned emotions into sound. He was still a teenager, but even then, he had the sharp mind of a businessman. "You could make money from this," he told me once. Real money. I laughed at the idea. Back then, I wasn't thinking about fame or fortune. I just wanted to play. Then Claudia entered my life. She was everything I wasn't: structured, disciplined, always chasing the next goal. At first, she admired my free spirit. She would sit beside me while I played, listening with a dreamy look in her eyes. But admiration slowly turned into frustration. "You need a plan," she would say. "You can't just play music forever and hope life works out." She wanted me to be something I wasn't. I didn't argue. I didn't try to change her mind. I just let her go. While she climbed the corporate ladder, I packed my bags and traveled. I played in jazz clubs, on street corners, in underground bars where people weren't looking for the next big thing. They just wanted to feel something real. And that was what my music did. It reached people. It spoke to them in ways words never could. I never cared about money, but money came anyway. I built a name for myself, not in boardrooms or skyscrapers, but in concert halls, in viral videos that racked up millions of views. My fan base spanned the globe, yet I never flaunted my success. And now, I was standing in Claudia's world once again, watching as her new husband sneered at me, completely oblivious to the fact that the middle school dropout he was mocking could buy and sell his entire empire 10 times over. Richard didn't know, but Marcus did. He stood beside me, his expression unreadable as he watched Richard dig himself deeper into his own arrogance. "You really don't know who he is, do you?" Marcus finally said, his voice calm, but laced with amusement. Richard turned to him with a frown. "What the hell are you talking about?" I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. "Nothing," I said, taking another sip of my drink. "Enjoy your night." And with that, I turned away, leaving Richard stewing in his own ignorance. Because soon enough, he was going to find out exactly who I was. And when that moment came, the look on his face would be worth every second of this ridiculous night. The wedding ceremony had ended, and now the reception was in full swing. Guests clinked their champagne glasses, murmuring about business deals and luxury vacations while the orchestra played an elegant tune in the background. The waitstaff moved seamlessly between the tables, refilling drinks, offering delicately plated hors d'oeuvres, and ensuring that every guest's experience was nothing short of perfection. I had remained on the sidelines for most of the night, an outsider in a world I had deliberately left behind. But Claudia, always so careful about appearances, made her way toward me at last. She looked exactly as I remembered her, elegant, poised, the very definition of success. The gown she wore was an extension of that image, fitted to perfection, expensive enough to make a statement without seeming excessive. She stopped in front of me, hesitation flickering in her eyes. "You came," she said softly, as if she hadn't expected me to. I did. For a moment, she seemed unsure of what to say. Maybe she was wondering why I accepted the invitation in the first place. Maybe she wanted to know what I had been doing all these years. Or maybe she was simply realizing that I wasn't the same man she had left behind. Before she could say another word, he stepped in. Richard, the man who had spent the entire evening trying to belittle me, as if doing so would cement his own superiority. His arm wrapped around Claudia's waist, his grip firm, possessive. "Listen, drop out," he scoffed, his voice laced with arrogance. "My wife doesn't need someone like you lingering around. Cut ties and move on." It was almost comical. The way he stood there, so assured of his dominance, so convinced that I was nothing more than a footnote in Claudia's past. I let out a breath, shaking my head slightly. "All right," I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "I'll start by closing my $700 million account at your bank." The moment the words left my mouth, the air in the ballroom seemed to shift. Everything, every conversation, every clink of a champagne glass, every note from the orchestra, seemed to pause all at once. The people around us turned their heads, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. But the best reaction came from Richard himself. His smirk faltered. His confidence wavered. "What?" he stammered, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. I glanced at Claudia, who had gone pale, her grip tightening around the stem of the champagne glass in her hand. "You heard me," I said casually, tilting my head. "I'm withdrawing my $700 million. Your wife is the CEO. She can handle it, right?" Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room but chokes it. Marcus, who had been quietly watching from the sidelines, let out a low whistle, shaking his head in amusement. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. I turned my gaze back to Richard, who was struggling to process what had just happened. His hands twitched at his sides, his jaw tightening, his entire demeanor shifting from arrogance to outright panic. "You're lying," he finally said, but there was no conviction behind his words. Claudia, however, wasn't as quick to dismiss me. She reached out, grabbing my wrist, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're joking, right?" There was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Not the fear of losing me. The fear of losing what I represented. I shrugged, slipping my phone back into my pocket. "Why would I joke?" I said lightly. "Your husband wanted me gone. I'm just making it easier." The color drained from Richard's face. He turned sharply to Claudia, his voice breaking as he demanded, "This is a joke, right? This guy doesn't have that kind of money." But before Claudia could respond, Marcus, who had been enjoying the scene far too much, let out a chuckle, shaking his head. "You really don't know who he is, do you?" Richard's eyes darted between Marcus and Claudia, his panic growing by the second. I could see it, the realization creeping in, the weight of his mistake settling heavily on his shoulders. And for the first time that night, he wasn't the one in control. I turned to leave, fully prepared to walk away and let them deal with the aftermath of their own arrogance. But just as I took a step forward, Richard grabbed my arm. "Wait." I pulled my arm free, meeting his desperate gaze with an impassive stare. "You made your point," he said, his voice unsteady. "You're obviously successful. There's no need to." I cut him off with a simple tilt of my head. "No need to what?" I asked. "Show you what happens when you underestimate people?" Richard swallowed hard. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the frantic way his mind was scrambling for a way to salvage the situation. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough so that only he could hear. "Next time," I murmured, "be careful who you look down on." And with that, I turned away, leaving him standing there, speechless, humiliated, and fully aware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The night was far from over, but one thing was certain. I had already won. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air, thickening the atmosphere of the once lavish celebration. The clinking of glasses had stopped, the hum of casual conversation replaced with stunned silence. Eyes darted toward Claudia, toward Richard, toward me. The dropout, the nobody, the man who was supposed to be insignificant. Except now, I wasn't. Now, I was the only person in this room who mattered. Claudia's grip on my wrist tightened, her fingers cold against my skin. I could see the panic blooming in her eyes, the careful facade of composure she had perfected over the years cracking at the edges. "You're joking, right?" she whispered again, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. Claudia had always been meticulous, always in control. Every move she made was calculated, deliberate. But this was the first time I had ever seen her rattled. I let out a quiet chuckle. Why would I joke? I said smoothly, slipping my wrist free from her grasp. Your husband wanted me gone. I'm just making it easier. Richard finally snapped out of his stunned silence, shaking his head as if trying to shake off reality itself. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and for a moment, I almost thought he might try something stupid. This is ridiculous, he muttered under his breath before turning sharply to Claudia. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me he doesn't have that kind of money. But Claudia couldn't say anything, because she already knew the truth. She had always assumed she knew who I was. That when she left me behind, she had moved on to something better. And yet, here she was, realizing that I had become something far beyond what she could have imagined. Marcus, who had been watching the entire exchange with barely concealed amusement, finally let out a chuckle, shaking his head. You really don't know who he is, do you? He said, looking at Richard like he was the biggest idiot in the room. Richard turned to him, his face a mask of frustration. What the hell are you talking about? Marcus smirked. You should probably Google him. That was all it took. Within seconds, whispers rippled through the room, fingers tapping on phone screens as people looked me up. And then, just like that, the shift happened. I could feel it. The weight of 100 pairs of eyes flickering between me and the glowing screens in their hands. The slow realization washing over them. The collective gasp that followed. Someone near the back of the room exhaled a sharp breath. No way. Another voice, barely above a whisper. Wait, he's... Richard snatched Claudia's phone from her hands, his eyes scanning the screen, his expression twisting into something between shock and dread. And then, finally, the moment I had been waiting for. His hands shook, his confidence, so unwavering, so absolute, shattered. I watched as reality sank in, as he pieced together every mistake he had made tonight. Because now, he knew. I wasn't just some washed-up nobody from Claudia's past. I wasn't a dropout. I wasn't a failure. I was one of the most renowned pianists in the world. A musician with an audience of millions. A net worth that far surpassed his own. And the worst part? I had never needed to flaunt it. Richard's jaw clenched so tight, I thought he might break his teeth. He turned back to Claudia, his face ashen. Did you know? He demanded. Claudia didn't answer. Because she didn't have one. She had left me behind all those years ago, certain that I would amount to nothing. She had assumed that, without her, I would fade into obscurity. And now, at her own wedding, in front of everyone she respected, she was being forced to face the truth. Richard took a shaky breath, his mind undoubtedly scrambling for a way to fix this. Look, he started, his voice low, measured. There's no need to be rash. Let's just... I raised a brow. Rash? He swallowed. I'm just saying maybe we should talk. You don't actually have to close your account. I mean, let's be reasonable here. I studied him for a long moment. A part of me considered dragging this out, watching him squirm a little longer. But then I decided I was already bored. I turned my attention back to Claudia. It's funny, I mused, how things work out, isn't it? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because she knew that, no matter how much power or status she had built for herself, no matter how far ahead she had thought she had lost. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I had plotted some elaborate scheme to humiliate her. But because life had a way of evening things out. And tonight, fate had decided to settle the score. I turned away from them, stepping toward the exit, but Richard called after me one last time. Wait, you're not actually closing your account, are you? I smirked, not bothering to look back. I'll think about it. And with that, I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind a wedding that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. I stepped out of the ballroom, but the echoes of the stunned silence behind me followed like an unspoken chorus. The night air was crisp against my skin as I moved toward the grand staircase leading down to the courtyard, my every step measured, deliberate. This wasn't how I had imagined the night going. Then again, I hadn't expected much when I first opened Claudia's invitation. I had assumed she sent it out of obligation, or maybe to prove something to herself, that she had moved on, that she had one. But now, I wasn't so sure, because the way she had looked at me back there, that wasn't the look of a woman who felt victorious. That was the look of a woman who had realized too late that she had miscalculated everything. The breeze carried the muffled hum of voices from inside, the party still continuing despite the tension that had fractured the perfect illusion. I could only imagine the whispers spreading now, the quiet conversations picking apart the moment they had all witnessed firsthand. I had spent years living outside of their world, and yet, in the span of one evening, I had somehow managed to redefine my presence within it. I reached the bottom of the steps, planning to call for a car when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Wait, I sighed before I even turned around. I already knew who it was. Claudia. She stood at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed against the golden lights of the ballroom entrance. The way she held herself was the same as always, poised, elegant, still in control even when everything around her was falling apart. Except now, I could see the cracks. For the first time since I had arrived, she wasn't performing for an audience. She wasn't the unshakable CEO, the woman who had orchestrated this perfect evening. Right now, she was just Claudia, the same woman I had once shared late-night conversations with, the same woman who had once curled up beside me as I played the piano, letting my music lull her to sleep, the same woman who had walked away. I didn't move as she descended the stairs, her steps slower now, more hesitant. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quieter than before. "There's nothing left to say," I replied evenly. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe I was actually walking away from this. "I was wrong about you," she admitted, and I caught the slight tremor in her voice. "About everything." I let out a humorless chuckle, glancing up at the sky. The city lights flickered in the distance, the skyline an endless sprawl of glass and steel. Everything she had built her life around. "What part?" I asked, finally looking at her. "The part where you assumed I'd never be anything? Or the part where you thought I'd always be there, waiting for you to realize your mistake?" She flinched. Good. Because the truth had always been simple. She had never believed in me. Not really. She had loved me, once. But even back then, that love had always been conditional, hinged on the idea that one day, I would change. That I would wake up and suddenly decide to chase the kind of success she valued. And when I didn't, she left. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's the problem, isn't it?" I said, tilting my head. "You never asked. You never cared to know." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her fingers curling into the fabric of her wedding dress. "You have no idea how many times I thought about calling you," she finally admitted. "About asking if..." "If what?" I interrupted. "If I had changed? If I had finally become the person you wanted me to be?" She swallowed hard. I took a step closer, my voice calm but firm. "Claudia, you didn't leave me because I had no ambition. You left me because I refused to chase the kind of ambition you respected." Her breath hitched. "And that's okay," I continued. "You made your choice and I made mine. The difference is, I never regretted mine." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. She had spent years convincing herself that she had moved on, that her life was better without me, that she had everything she ever wanted. But now, on her wedding night, she was standing in front of me, struggling to find the words to justify her choices. She started, then sighed. "I just wanted to know if you were happy." I smiled then, small, knowing. I was happy the moment I stopped needing your approval. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. There it was, the truth she had never considered, the realization that I had never been waiting for her to realize her mistake, that I had never needed closure, because I had already moved past it long before she had. And that was the real loss. Not that she had left me, but that when she looked at me now, she knew, deep in her bones, that she had let go of something she could never get back. I took one last glance at her before turning away for the final time. Richard would still be inside, trying to salvage his bruised ego, clinging to whatever dignity he had left. The guests would still be whispering about the scene they had just witnessed. And Claudia? Claudia would go back inside that ballroom, smile for the cameras, and play her part as the perfect bride. But tonight, long after the music faded and the guests left, she would lie awake knowing that she had built her perfect life, her perfect empire. And yet, somehow, she had still lost. I walked toward the waiting car, sliding into the back seat as the driver closed the door behind me. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages from people who actually mattered. Musicians, old friends, people who had never doubted me. And then, almost on impulse, I opened my music app. I hit record, and in the quiet of the car, as the city blurred past the window, I started playing the melody that had once been Claudia's favorite, For Old Friends and Lessons Learned. Because some memories don't need words. Some lessons don't need to be spoken. And some victories? Some victories are won in silence. The city lights flickered past in a blur of gold and white as the car cruised through the quiet streets. The weight of the night should have settled by now, but I could still feel the tension lingering in my chest like an unfinished chord. I leaned back against the seat, fingers grazing over the screen of my phone as I scrolled through unread messages. My inbox was full. Congratulatory texts from old friends, amused comments from people who had witnessed the spectacle at the wedding, and even a few industry executives reaching out with offers I had no intention of entertaining. It was strange, the way the past had suddenly resurfaced in one night. I hadn't come to Claudia's wedding expecting a confrontation. I hadn't even come with the intention of proving anything. But life had a funny way of tying up loose ends in its own brutal, poetic fashion. And Claudia? She had received her lesson in respect the hard way. The thought brought a small smirk to my lips, but it quickly faded as my thumb hovered over an old contact in my phone. I stared at the name for a long moment before finally closing the screen. There was no point in looking back now. A soft chime interrupted my thoughts, and I glanced at my screen. Marcus, where the hell did you disappear to? You left before the real fun started. I chuckled, shaking my head before typing a quick response. Me? I figured the entertainment portion of the night was already handled. His reply came almost instantly. Marcus, you should have stayed a little longer. Richard nearly lost his mind after you left. It was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. I could picture it perfectly, Richard, trying to salvage what little dignity he had left, frantically whispering to Claudia, demanding an explanation, realizing too late that he had just burned a bridge he should have never crossed. I could also imagine the whispers that would haunt them for weeks, if not months. The ex-husband was actually a millionaire? How did they not know? Claudia really downgraded. Huh? And the best part? I didn't even have to lift a finger to orchestrate any of it. I tucked my phone away and glanced out the window. The streets had emptied, the city settling into its quiet late-night rhythm. The car slowed as it approached my building, an understated yet elegant brownstone tucked away from the chaos of the downtown district. Unlike Claudia, I had never needed grand displays of wealth to prove anything. We're here, sir, the driver said, stepping out to open the door for me. I gave him a nod before stepping onto the pavement, adjusting the cuff of my jacket as I inhaled the crisp night air. As I reached the door, a familiar voice called out from behind. Leaving without a goodbye? That's cold, man. I turned to see Marcus leaning against his own car, a knowing grin on his face. You didn't have to chase me down just to say that, I quipped, unlocking my front door. Marcus shoved his hands in his pockets, following me inside like he owned the place. What can I say? I had to see the aftermath for myself. You made quite an exit back there. I shook my head, tossing my keys onto the table as we entered the living room. The space was simple, warm lighting, dark wood floors, an antique grand piano sitting in the corner. It was a far cry from the cold luxury Claudia had surrounded herself with. Marcus walked over to the piano, running his fingers along the polished surface before whistling. You know, I always wondered where you ended up, he mused. Turns out, you ended up on top. Quietly, of course, but still. I shrugged, pulling off my jacket. I never needed an audience. Could have fooled me, Marcus chuckled. The way you played them all tonight? That was a damn performance. I smirked, shaking my head. That wasn't a performance. I corrected. That was just reality hitting them a little harder than they expected. Marcus laughed, sinking into the couch. You have no idea how much I've wanted to see Richard taken down a peg. He's been unbearable since day one. The moment Claudia started dating him, it was like he thought he owned the world. That explains why he acted like a complete idiot tonight, I muttered. Marcus nodded. He's always been insecure. That's why he flaunts his money, why he always has to prove he's the most important person in the room. But you? You walked in without saying a damn word, and suddenly, he was the fool. That's power, my friend. I leaned against the armrest, my fingers absently tapping against my knee. I didn't do it for power, I said. I just wanted to remind them that some people don't need validation to be successful. Marcus exhaled, shaking his head with a grin. And that's exactly why you won tonight. I fell silent, my gaze drifting toward the piano. You know, Marcus said, leaning back, Claudia didn't look too happy after you left. I raised a brow. She's married now. Her happiness isn't my problem. Maybe not, he admitted. But let's be real. Tonight wasn't just a wedding for her. It was a statement. She wanted to show you that she had one. But instead, she got the exact opposite. I considered that for a moment, the thought settling into my chest like a final note at the end of a melody. Maybe, I murmured. Marcus studied me for a long moment before sighing. Well, if you ever want to rub it in just a little more, I've got plenty of stories about Richard that'll make you laugh. I chuckled, shaking my head. I think I've done enough damage for one night. Marcus stood, stretching. Fair enough. But don't be a stranger, all right? Some of us actually enjoy your company. Noted, I said, walking him to the door. As he stepped out into the night, he turned back with one last smirk. By the way, that whole "I'll think about it" line, pure gold. Richard's probably still sweating over it. I laughed, watching as he disappeared down the street. Closing the door behind me, I exhaled deeply. The night had been unexpected, chaotic, a reminder of how far I had come. And yet, I felt lighter, because now, there were no more ghosts from my past waiting in the shadows. No more unfinished stories. Just me, my music, and the life I had built on my own terms. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. There was no lingering weight in my chest, no unresolved emotions clawing at the edges of my mind. The past was exactly where it needed to be, behind me. The sunlight streamed through the curtains of my loft, warming the hardwood floors and casting long, golden streaks across the grand piano in the corner. The instrument had been with me through everything, from the days when I had nothing but a worn-out keyboard to now, when I had built a life far greater than what anyone had expected. As I stretched and pulled myself out of bed, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Marcus. I smirked, shaking my head. Of course, he wouldn't let last night die down just yet. I picked up the call and leaned against the window, watching the city come to life below me. Please tell me you saw the news, Marcus said, his voice full of barely contained amusement. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned? Depends, he said. Are you concerned about the fact that the entire wedding is trending? I blinked. Trending? What the hell are you talking about? Marcus laughed. Just check social media. Oh, and before you do, don't say I didn't warn you. I ended the call and immediately pulled up my phone, tapping into one of the news apps I rarely bothered with. And there it was. CEO's wedding becomes a night to remember, for all the wrong reasons. I scrolled further. My curiosity piqued. There were hundreds of posts, all dissecting what had happened last night, from Richard's arrogance to the moment he realized he had insulted the wrong man. One video had already gone viral, a recording of the exact moment I had said, "I'll start by closing my $700 million account at your bank." The caption? The art of a silent flex. I exhaled, shaking my head in disbelief. I had never sought attention for what I did. I had spent years avoiding the very world that now seemed fascinated with me. And yet, here it was. The internet had caught on, and people were loving the irony. I scrolled further and found comments that ranged from brutal to outright hilarious. Imagine marrying a man who doesn't even know his wife's ex could buy his company 3 times over. LMAO. Richard, why are you even here? Him. Just checking if my money's still safe in your wife's bank. Claudia's face when she realized she fumbled the bag, priceless. I shook my head, placing the phone on the counter. It was strange. For years, Claudia and I had lived completely separate lives, with no overlap, until last night. Now, our names were being spoken together again, but not in the way she had hoped. And I just knew, that she would hate every second of it. The thought made me chuckle as I made my way to the kitchen, brewing a fresh cup of coffee. But just as I took my first sip, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Marcus. It was Claudia. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether I should even bother answering. I had nothing left to say to her. I had walked away last night for a reason. And yet, something about the fact that she was calling me now, after everything, made me curious. I sighed before finally answering. Claudia. There was silence on the other end. Then, finally a sigh. I assume you've seen the news? I smirked. Did you really think I wouldn't? She let out a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I leaned against the counter, tilting my head slightly. And how exactly was it supposed to go? She hesitated before responding. I didn't think it would turn into this. I didn't invite you to humiliate you. I scoffed. No? Then why did Richard feel so comfortable trying to insult me in front of everyone? She didn't answer right away. He didn't know who you were, she admitted. I chuckled. That much was obvious. Another pause. I thought you would have told me, you know. That caught me off guard. Told you what? That you became this. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. You never asked, Claudia. She sighed again. I know. There it was. The regret. Not just for last night. For everything. For walking away. For assuming I would never be anything. For realizing too late that she had been wrong about me. But I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of an emotional reunion. I had nothing left for her. I don't know what you expect me to say, Claudia, I said evenly. But whatever it is, I'm not interested. She let out a slow breath. I figured. Silence stretched between us again, heavier this time. I knew this would be the last time we ever spoke, and somehow I was okay with that. I hope you're happy, she said at last, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I am, I answered simply, because for the first time in years, I truly meant it. Without another word, I ended the call, placing my phone face down on the counter. And just like that, it was over. No more unfinished business. No more what-ifs. Just me, my music, and the life I had built on my own terms. The past was finally where it belonged. And I was exactly where I needed to be. The silence after the call was different from any I had experienced before. It wasn't heavy or suffocating like unfinished business. It was clean, like the last note of a song played exactly as it was meant to be. I stood there in my kitchen, my coffee now cooling in my hand, realizing something simple but profound. It was over. Not in the way heartbreak lingers. Not in the way some people tell themselves they've moved on but secretly still check old photos in the middle of the night. No, this was truly over. There was nothing left to say, nothing left unresolved. Claudia and I had walked separate paths for years, and last night had been the final crossroads where our worlds collided before splitting apart forever. And somehow, I had been given the last word, not just in conversation, but in the way life had played out. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Claudia to beg for me back, nor did I need Richard to suffer beyond the public humiliation he had already earned. All I needed was what I already had, a life that was mine and mine alone. With a quiet sigh, I placed my phone down and turned to the one thing that had always made sense: music. My fingers found the smooth keys of the grand piano, and without thinking, I began to play. The melody was soft, almost bittersweet. It wasn't for Claudia, it was for me. A quiet reminder that I had never needed her validation, that I had always been enough, just as I was, that I had never been the one who lost. Halfway through the song, a notification lit up my phone screen. I nearly ignored it, but something told me to look. Marcus had sent me a video. I sighed, shaking my head. Of course he had. I pressed play, and then I laughed. It was a recording from inside the wedding hall after I had left. The camera was shaky, likely taken by someone trying not to get caught, but the audio was crystal clear. Richard stood near the table, his face red with fury, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke to Claudia. "What the hell were you thinking, inviting him here?" Claudia looked exhausted, her face blank, her fingers massaging her temple. "Richard, please." "No, don't please me," he snapped. "Do you realize what you've done? Do you know how many people were watching? How many of them are laughing at us right now?" She exhaled. "It wasn't supposed to go like this." "Well, it did," Richard practically shouted. "And now you've made me look like an idiot." One of his business partners tried to step in, speaking calmly. "Richard, maybe we should sit?" "No," he interrupted, shaking his head. "This was supposed to be about us. About me. And instead, I just got humiliated in front of everyone." Marcus's voice appeared in the background, dripping with amusement. "Oh, don't take it so personally, Richard. You're just mad because you found out the hard way that you're not the most important man in your wife's life tonight." The audible gasp in the background was pure gold. Richard lost it. "You think this is funny?" he roared, moving toward Marcus, only for someone to hold him back. "That guy, he's nobody. Just because he's got money doesn't mean—" "You're right," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "His money isn't the point. It's the fact that he didn't even have to try to bring you down. He just existed, and it was enough." Richard's face contorted with rage. The video cut off. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. It was perfect. Richard had spent the whole night trying to prove his superiority, only to realize too late that he had never even been in the competition. And Claudia? She had miscalculated everything. I sent a quick text back to Marcus. "I hope you know that video made my whole morning." His reply came immediately. "Marcus, figured you'd appreciate it." "Oh, and in case you were wondering, Richard didn't even sleep at home last night. Guy stormed off in the middle of the night. Classy, huh?" I smirked. Couldn't have happened to a better guy." Marcus responded with a string of laughing emojis before adding, "Marcus, so, what's next for you? Now that your villain origin story is complete?" I chuckled. Nothing changes. I keep playing music, keep living my life. That's all I ever needed." Marcus's reply came slower this time. "Marcus, you really won, didn't you?" I set my phone down, my fingers grazing over the piano keys again. Yeah, I did. Not because I had more money than Richard. Not because I had stolen the show at their wedding. But because I had never been trying to win in the first place. I had just been living. And that, more than anything, was the real victory. With one last deep breath, I placed my hands on the piano and began to play. The notes filled the room, rich and full, echoing through the quiet morning. No cameras, no audience, no expectations, just music, just me. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.